Imagine a World Cup you don't have to qualify for. There's no 2 years of agonizing qualifiers, no must-win playoff on a freezing night in some far-off stadium, no heartbreak, no last-minute goal that sends your nation home. Instead, one day, an envelope arrives. It's an invitation. If your country writes back and says yes before the deadline, you're in. That's it. You're going to the World Cup. Now imagine that they sent those invitations out across the entire planet, and they were hoping for 16 teams, and they couldn't even get that many. In the end, only 13 showed up. That was the very first World Cup. 13 teams, no qualifying, one city, a stadium that wasn't even finished when the tournament kicked off, and referees who took to the field wearing full suits. Compare that to right now. The 2026 World Cup is the biggest in history. 48 teams, 104 matches, spread across 3 different countries and 16 cities, with hundreds of nations having battled through years of qualifiers just to claim one of those 48 precious spots. The entire first World Cup was smaller than a single group stage today. So how on earth did it actually work when only 13 teams showed up? Let's start with the most astonishing part. There was no qualification at all. The 1930 World Cup remains the only one in history where not a single team had to earn its place. Here's how it worked. FIFA, football's governing body, had just decided to create a world championship, the idea of their president, Jules Rimet, and to fill it, they simply invited every country affiliated with FIFA to take part, and gave them a deadline to accept, the 28th of February, 1930. Say yes by then, and you were in the World Cup. The original plan was actually for a 16-team knockout tournament, and if enough nations entered, they'd even add a second division, but that plan quietly collapsed, because the teams just didn't sign up. Not enough of them wanted to come. And the reason is one we've explored before on this channel, getting there. The host was Uruguay, in South America. For any European team, that meant a brutal sea voyage of around 2 weeks across the Atlantic, during the depths of the Great Depression, with players forced to leave their jobs for months. So they said no. In fact, by that February deadline, not a single European country had entered. None. It took the personal begging of Jules Rimet to save his own tournament. He persuaded France to come. A FIFA official convinced Belgium, and Romania only came because their king, Carol II, personally selected the squad, sorted out their time off work, and sent them on their way. In the end, just 4 European teams made the journey. The bulk of the tournament came from the Americas, 7 South American teams, which is still more than at any World Cup since, plus 2 from North America. Add it all up, and you get the grand total that built the first World Cup, 13. Now, here's a detail that tells you everything about how loose and uncertain this whole thing was. At a modern World Cup, the draw is a massive global television event, held months in advance, with every team known and confirmed. In 1930, they couldn't do that. Why? Because right up until the boats actually docked in Montevideo, nobody was completely sure who was going to turn up. So the draw to decide the groups didn't happen until all the teams had physically arrived in Uruguay. They waited for everyone to get off the ships, counted who was actually there, and only then sorted them into groups. And the structure they came up with was wonderfully improvised. 13 teams obviously don't split evenly, so they made 4 groups. One group had 4 teams, and the other 3 groups had just 3 teams each. Each group played a simple round robin, everyone playing everyone once. And then, the 4 group winners went straight into the semifinals. That's it. No round of 16, no quarterfinals, no second chances. There wasn't even a third-place playoff. The whole tournament, start to finish, opening match to final, was just 18 games. 18. To put that in perspective, the 2026 World Cup will have 104 matches. The entire first World Cup contained fewer games than the opening few days of the modern one, and every single one of those 18 matches was played in just one city, Montevideo. The grand main stadium built for the occasion, the Estadio Centenario, was running so late because of heavy winter rain that it wasn't even ready until 5 days into the tournament. The first matches had to be squeezed into 2 smaller grounds while the builders raced to finish the showpiece. So picture this tiny, improvised tournament actually getting underway. The opening 2 matches kicked off at the very same time on the 13th of July, the first World Cup games ever played. France beat Mexico 4-1, the United States beat Belgium 3-0, and what followed was football in its rawest, strangest, most amateur form. The referees officiated in full suits, and the standard of officiating was, let's say, an adventure. In one match between Argentina and France, the Brazilian referee got so carried away that he blew the whistle for full time 6 minutes early. With the game still going, the players had to be called back out to finish it. In another match, Argentina against Mexico, the referee in charge happened to also be the coach of the Bolivian national team, and during that single game, he awarded 3 penalties. Then there's the crowds. We always picture World Cup matches in front of a roaring sea of 90,000 fans. But one group game at the 1930 tournament was watched by an official crowd of around 2,000, and by some accounts, the real number was closer to just 300 people. It remains the smallest crowd in the history of the World Cup. Imagine a World Cup match with barely enough spectators to fill a school hall, but amid the chaos, real stories were being written. The United States showed up with a big, powerful, physical team that opponents nicknamed the Shot Putters, and they stormed all the way to the semifinals, with a player named Bert Patenaude scoring the very first hat-trick in World Cup history. And then there was Argentina, the pantomime villains of the tournament. Their matches were full of brawls. Their semifinal against the United States turned so violent that, at one point, an American had 4 teeth knocked out, and another ended up in hospital. Argentina became so unpopular with the locals that their team hotel had to be placed under round-the-clock police protection. There's even a perfect underdog tale in the top scorer. A striker named Guillermo Stabile finished as the tournament's leading marksman with 8 goals, and he'd only got into the Argentina team in the first place because one of their stars was injured. He never even played for Argentina again after that World Cup, but he walked away as its first ever golden boot. So let's actually feel what this tournament was like. You're a player. You've stepped off a ship after 2 weeks at sea. You arrive in a single city that has become the entire world of football for 1 month. There's no sprawling tournament across a continent. Everything, every team, every match is right here, packed into Montevideo. You don't even know your group until you've arrived, and the draw is made on the spot. You might play in front of 90,000 screaming fans in the half-built main stadium, or in front of a few hundred curious locals in a small ground across town. The referee taking charge of your match might be wearing a suit, might blow up early by mistake, might also happen to coach one of the other teams. Everyone is improvising. Everyone is making it up as they go. There are no decades of tradition, no rule book of precedent, no giant machine running it all. It's just 13 teams, a handful of officials, one city, and the shared, slightly mad belief that this strange new idea, a championship for the whole world, might actually be worth something. And astonishingly, it was. The whole thing built towards a final between the hosts, Uruguay, and their great rivals, Argentina, which Uruguay won 4-2 to become the first champions of the world. So how did we get from that, 13 invited teams in one city, to the Colossus of 2026? It started growing almost immediately. Just 4 years later, at the 1934 World Cup in Italy, FIFA introduced a qualifying stage for the very first time, and suddenly the problem flipped completely. Instead of begging teams to show up, FIFA had more than 30 nations all desperate to take part, for only 16 places. The invitation was gone forever. Now you had to earn your spot. From there, the tournament just kept swelling to match the growth of the sport. It settled at 16 teams for decades. Then, in 1982, it expanded to 24, opening the door for far more nations from Africa and Asia. In 1998, it grew again to 32. And now, in 2026, it has exploded to 48 teams across 3 countries, the biggest World Cup ever staged. Think about that journey. A tournament that, in 1930, couldn't even attract 16 teams to fill it, is now one that hundreds of nations spend years and fortunes fighting just to reach. The thing they had to beg people to attend became the thing the entire planet competes to be part of, and that's the part that's almost impossible to wrap your head around. We look at the World Cup today, and we see something vast and untouchable. 48 teams, 104 matches, 3 nations, 16 cities. Billions of people watching every kick on glowing screens around the world. It feels like it must always have been a giant, like it arrived fully formed, enormous and inevitable. It didn't. It began as something almost unbelievably small and fragile and human. 13 teams that had to be personally talked into coming, a draw made only once the boats had docked, 18 matches in a single city, referees in suits blowing the whistle too early, a stadium still being built as the first games kicked off. The biggest sporting event on the face of the earth started as a tournament so tiny, so improvised, and so uncertain that it very nearly didn't happen at all. And maybe that's the most extraordinary thing about the World Cup, not how massive it has become, but how close it came to never beginning. Every one of those 48 teams marching out in 2026 is there because, almost 100 years ago, 13 teams were willing to cross an ocean for an idea nobody was even sure would work. They showed up, and that was enough to start everything.